At Muirfield Insurance, we understand that every horse is more than just an animal. They are partners in achieving greatness. We offer comprehensive insurance for racehorses, sport horses, and farms, ensuring they receive the utmost care. This allows you to concentrate on what's truly important. Muirfield Insurance. We're here to protect your passion. Visit us today at muirfieldinsurance.com.
An NYTV membership is your inside track to the ultimate New York thoroughbred racing experience. Free race day entrance to Belmont, Saratoga, Aqueduct, and Finger Lakes. A liaison with NYS Breeding and Development Fund. A voice in Albany working with legislators to help support the New York breeding and racing industries. Along with tons of member benefits, discounts on services and publications, educational programs, and so much more. Join today at nytbreeders.org/membership.
At Keeneland, a horse will always be measured in hands. Hands that see, that sense, that speak. Hands that hold our sport to a higher standard. Not for our sake, but for theirs. For the love of the horse, for generations to come.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the 2025 Virtual Thoroughbred Owner Conference Series. And I'm Gary Falter, and I'm with the Jockey Club. And this is our second panel in our series of 10 panels this year. And you can find our full schedule on our website, ownerview.com. And we'll have the dates and the times for each of the monthly webinars, so you can add those to your calendar. Now, typically our panels last about 50 to 55 minutes. And we've got Q&A at the end of each panel. And you might notice we're no longer using Zoom, but we've migrated to Microsoft Teams. So if you're connected, you're probably using Microsoft Teams. So as the panel progresses, you can use the Q&A feature that's in your Microsoft Teams. I believe it's at the top, and you can ask questions. And please keep your questions relevant to the topics that we're going to talk about. And we'll try to get to as many questions at the end as the time allows. But before we get started, I'd like to just take a moment to recognize our sponsors, starting with our presenting sponsors, which are Bessemer Trust and Keeneland and Stoll Keenan Ogden. And our panel sponsors today are, you think you saw their commercials, Muirfield Insurance and the New York Thoroughbred Breeders. And our Q&A sponsor today, as with all of our panels, is West Point Thoroughbreds. So thank you, West Point, New York Thoroughbred Breeders and Muirfield. And actually, our sincere thanks to all the sponsors for their continued support of thoroughbred ownership. And you can see on the screen all the different sponsors we're going to have this year. And again, a huge thank you for helping us offer these webinars at no charge to you, the audience. Okay, so today our panel topic is going to be Owners First. And I'd like to spend a moment and introduce our speakers for today. So I'm going to start with Jody Vela Gregory. Jody, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
And Jody is the Vice President of Industry Relations with First Racing. Next, I'd like to introduce Kathy Shercliffe. Hi, Kathy.
Hey, guys.
Welcome. Kathy is the Director of Equine Industry Relations with Churchill Downs Incorporated. Next, I'd like to introduce Andrew Offerman from NYRA. Andrew, welcome.
Thanks, Gary. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, and Andrew's the Senior Vice President of Racing and Operations at the New York Racing Association, also known as NYRA. And we have a fourth speaker, David Jerkins. He's having a little bit of technical difficulty joining us, but we're still trying to bring him on board. And David is with Del Mar, and he is a Senior Vice President and Racing Secretary at Del Mar. So welcome, everyone, and hopefully we can get David to join us here in a couple minutes. So I have a bunch of questions I'd like to ask the panelists as it relates to owners, how racetracks has ownership relations. And so let's just start with the first question, and we'll just kind of go around the horn, and everybody will have a shot at answering these questions. So most would agree that fans and owners are our most important groups in the industry, and there's a lot of groups. There's jockeys, there's trainers, there's all sorts of alphabet organizations, but honestly, you know, fans and owners, we've got to have a lot of fans, a growing fan base and an owner base to have an industry. So in your opinion, how essential or important are thoroughbred owners at your racetrack and, in your opinion, to the industry? So let's start off with Jody. Jody, why don't you start off with that question? So just talk about the importance you feel and your organization feels about having thoroughbred owners.
For sure. Like you mentioned, every stakeholder plays a crucial role, but at the core of it, we do have owners that are primary for multiple reasons. I think first and foremost, the financial investment alone that they make is basically, supporting racing and all of the other entities that go along with it, breeding, sales, training, all of that. So without that financial investment, we don't really have a sport. And plus, there's a lot of other things. They all have public engagement, right? They all have their own platforms. They have a voice. They have their different ways to communicate out how relevant racing is and keeping that in the public eye as well. They obviously have advocacy, influence. They sit on a lot of boards. They sit in a lot of associations. So there's a lot of things that are swayed by the owners themselves. And ultimately just employment. Without owners, a lot of the people in the racing world wouldn't have a job. So I would say they're pretty crucial.
Okay. Kathy, you'd like to add to that?
I agree with everything Jody just said. She stated it really well. Without the owners, we don't really have a sport. So that's first and foremost. I'd just add that, something that Jody touched on, but I think is very important, is that owners are always the key first fan. I always think through, if an owner's not showing up at a race, why would another person want to show up? So to me, that's always one of the things that we always want to look back at, is they are our number one fan and option to get people there.
Yeah, I've always thought and said this, owners are fans first. Yeah, Andrew, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think just to touch on a similar component to what both Kathy and Jody shared, that first fan ideology is very important. And I think historically that was really a word of mouth. And now with the advent of new technologies and other forms of social media, it's even more important, because those are the people that have a direct voice to the rest of the industry.
They can always hear you.
Okay, looks like David, have you joined us?
Hi, David.
Apologies for the technical difficulties.
That's all right. Glad you're on board. So we're just starting with the first question about the importance of owners in our industry. So I'll just jump to the next question. Most racetracks have an owner's relation person on staff. So talk about how your racetrack interacts with owners and their guests on race days, on days that they race. So, Kathy, why don't you start with this one as far as your owner relations persons and how they interact with owners?
Sure. We have one at all of our tracks. I think, it's always a little bit different from the big race day versus every other race day. I'm currently going through all of our processes for Oaks and Derby, because it's always a little bit different for the really big days. I know Jody just finished with the Santa Anita Derby, and it was a little bit different than every other day as well. And the Wood Memorial up at Naira and everything. So I know that it's a little bit different no matter what on those big days. For me, I think that that's our first and foremost. Probably most people are familiar with. I love using her as an example. She actually was a nominee for the Thoroughbred Industry Employee Award last year. Vicki Tomlinson, she is who I always think about and what she would do when I'm interacting with owners, because she has had such a long career in this industry, and just the way she treats people. You could be a gazillionaire or have $0 and she treats you exactly the same. And I think that's always the way that we should treat people. And I always point our newer people in horseman relations to go by her example and really follow that mentality of treat every single owner like they are the Derby winning owner. That's kind of a mentality that I learned from Vicki. And so I'm really lucky to have someone like her to learn from the horseman relations. And I think each track has a little bit of a different, setting and what goes into it. But that is the importance, is the ability to access that person and then how they make everybody feel.
Okay. So Andrew, at the Naira racetracks, I'm sure you've got owner relations personnel. How do they interact, and what kind of benefits can an owner expect on race day when they race in New York?
Sure. So Elise Jacobs is our primary contact person. However, we supplement that with additional people during busy seasons or major race days, as Kathy points out. We've also tried to start to integrate technology into that component. So we've developed a communications platform that owners can sign up with that automates some of the components for those that maybe don't have the time or the energy to direct to phone calls or in-person communication, so they can do some of that themselves and work through the team a little bit on their own schedule. As far as what benefits people are able to obtain, it depends a bit on day, but largely you're able to get free access, some number of complimentary seats or dining, as well as other things that might be available specific to participation in major events.
Okay. So David, when Del Mar's racing and you have a lot of owners coming to the track, I mean, who handles their kind of like a concierge program? Who handles seats and dining and all that there at the Del Mar?
So we have a front side racing office of 3 individuals that work as horseman liaisons. And like Kathy said, the big days, obviously, you prioritize the stakes runners. So once the overnight is released, our staff begins to contact owners and trainers just to get a feel in terms of what seating they're looking for that particular day. We have our director's room, which we reserve specifically for stakes participants. And, if there are individuals that are racing on, non-stakes races and they're looking to accommodate, a party of whatever, we try to accommodate as best we can. Obviously, Pacific Classic Day and opening day are our 2 biggest days, but for any owner, our staff, our mantra is, if anybody's involved in this game from an owner's perspective, we want to make their experience enjoyable and do everything we can to accommodate. Unfortunately, sometimes we reserve tables and owners, have cancellations or horse scratches. Things come up. We'd like a little bit more communication if they are canceling. Sometimes we don't get that, but I think again, just the big days. Just trying to fit everybody in and take care of the participants for the stakes races first and foremost.
Okay, and Jody, how does that work at the first racing racetracks?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we, like as everyone has mentioned, that there are the big race days, but sorry, is that my feedback?
A little bit of background noise. Okay, go ahead.
But I do think like the mandate from our tracks overall, and I think a lot of people have touched on it already, is, whatever experience or whatever race people are in, to make sure that we are giving them the best experience. I mean, as you know, Gulfstream Park races literally every day of the year. Santa Anita has horses on track 10 months of the year. So it is making sure that no matter when people show up, that they are getting an experience that is, relevant to the effort, the money, everything that they've put in. Yeah, so I do think that, like everyone says, we have racetrack liaisons. They're amazing at what they do. And I find it's like the little touches that make a big difference. Like if I say, hey, Stacy at Gulfstream, this owner's coming, like what's their favorite drink? Like she knows it, are people here, like they know where everyone wants to sit. And I just think those little touches really go a long way. And yeah, for our marquee races, I think it's really important to celebrate those. I mean, we do have little things as well. Well, big things, I guess. We have car services for people when they're coming in, hotels, and to get to the airports, hotel concierge if they need room reservations. We do gifting lounges, just, make people feel very special. But yeah, ultimately it is no matter what or why you're coming, we just want to make sure that the experience that you're getting is very high.
Okay, so the audience knows on ownerview.com, we have every racetrack listed, and on every racetrack's profile page, we list the person or persons at the racetrack who does the owner relations and a phone number or email or both. So that makes it easy for you to find how to contact Elise or Vicky or whoever may be the person at that racetrack. And I will say, it's a little difficult when you go to the racetrack websites to find that person. So that might be a good takeaway for our speakers, maybe to take a look at that horseman section, because I looked at it yesterday and it was a bit of a challenge. And I'm only thinking from a new owner's perspective, how they might know how to contact the owner relations person at your respective track. So just a just a point there. But yeah, go to OwnerView because we try to keep that updated and an easy place to go to one website to find out who that person is. So, so then there's, days where the owners come to the racetrack, but they don't have a horse running. They just want to sit in their favorite seat or go to their favorite dining room. I mean, how do you all accommodate that? Are there any special treatments, or are they just more or less a fan that day? There was one racetrack, we had a meeting a number of years ago that said, when an owner comes in and they swipe their card, we have a person meet them before they even get, halfway through the walkway to take them to their table, their favorite table. So anybody want to chime in on how do you deal with owners on non-race days where they're just there with guests and friends to enjoy the races?
I'm happy to start. I think that, your question, you phrased it interestingly with the non-race days, because I think you mean on race days that aren't the big day, that they have one in.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think the non-race day when there isn't a live race is something that, I see a lot too when people accessing the backside and how to go see your horses. So I think for me, it's a double-edged question. On the one hand, with the Kentucky Horse Racing and Gaming Corporation licenses for Churchill Downs Racetrack, you can scan in pretty much any day. And a lot of the owners, we have so much space in the boxes and stuff like that, that a lot of people just prefer to do that. They prefer to just come in, find their spot, watch the race, and head out. For the most part, our racing offices at all of our properties are pretty accessible. Don't worry, it is on my radar to start checking through all of our websites too. I've been doing the same thing. I try to go back, and I'm going to pick on my dad for a second, but he is an owner, and that's what I always think about is, what would my dad say? Could he read this? Could he figure out who to call? And I'll tell you, more often than not, I'll send it to him and he's like, Kathy, just fix it for me. So we're working on it. It's a work in progress. Like anything, technology is always the, best thing and also a headache. But so on that aspect, I think that, for us, it's like maybe not providing a specific table, but a box or GA tickets, really listening to what people want. Of course, there's always the people that then say they want to come on, certain big days, like the first Saturday in May. And sometimes it's a little bit different, but we try to keep it in mind as much as possible. On the other flip side is the, backside access, because that to me is the best part of being an owner, is being able to go see your horse. Yeah. And for us, for the most part, we have a fantastic, all of our backsides have a wonderful security team accessing, and as long as you have your owner's license, things like that, it's great. It is a little bit different on our really big race day. We have a lot of different security postures that we have to consider. So we've put some things in and it's evolved. And right now we've got a pretty great process where we send our trainers a barcode, a digital barcode that they can then send to their owners that should have access Derby week. And that just kind of helps police who should be back there and who should be accessing the backside. Because as we would all agree, the safety of our equine athletes and horses is first and foremost.
Okay. So that's a good point. So maybe we can chat a little bit about backside access for owners. So David, when Del Mar's running and owner wants to go visit their horse, what's the process there to be able to access the backside?
So I think the experience for the owners, I always remember growing up, the cafeteria was a big spot. People wanted to go to the track kitchen, watch their horse in the morning. We allow through our stable gate, as long as an owner has a CHRB license, they will have access. Del Mar in the summer, it gets tricky with our parking situation on the backside. So we have a shuttle that takes owners to the backside before 10 o'clock. But most of our owners on the front side watching training, that's the experience that I think a lot of them enjoy. And you want to make that as presentable as possible. But I think what we've seen is definitely the summer meet, especially in the beginning of the meet, there's just this, anticipation for Del Mar summer. And, we do everything we can just to give owners as much access as possible in a safe fashion.
Great. So Andrew, at the New York tracks, if an owner wants to visit their horse on the backside, how's that process work, and how accessible are their horses to the owners?
Yeah, it's a little bit different in New York. So in addition to the New York Gaming Commission license, we also provide a NYRA ID. So you actually obtain a secondary badge. That badge helps you park for free during the summer at Saratoga, provides you access to some locations within the facility, and also serves as your backstretch access pass. So that office is open every day, and essentially it's a secondary credential that allows people access not only on front side, but also throughout the backstretch.
Okay, good to know. So all owners know how difficult it is to win a race. So when an owner horse wins a race, what kind of recognition or special treatment do owners receive at your respective racetracks and their guests? So Jody, win a race at Santa Anita or Gulfstream, other than the excitement and the celebration in the winner's circle, what else takes place?
There's a lot of high fives. So yeah, luckily at Santa Anita, we're lucky we actually have a dedicated winner's terrace that's attached right to the winner's circle. So no matter what day, what race, like we've been saying, it doesn't matter like what race you have, like there's been so much like time and energy and, blood, sweat and tears going into it. So we have a host that takes people up there into this winner's terrace, offer them champagne or soft drinks, and they have up until the next race to kind of watch the replays, enjoy their time with their guests, just kind of like relive that moment. Because I mean, there's been people, even if they're winning a maiden claim or something, an allowance, that feels like a grade 1 race. So just trying to celebrate that as best we can. And then like some of the little things, like we also have like a best turned out every day, every race as well. And even though the money is going to the grooms for that, I mean, I think it's still also a nice nod to the owners, like just like recognizing their horses and things like that. And then, yeah, I think like Marquee Week, we do have something that we've done is have a professional photographer. I'm sorry, by Marquee Weeks, I mean like Pegasus, Preakness, our big event days. Something that has got a lot of really positive feedback is we have a professional photographer, and she actually just takes photos all week. So she's there in the morning, she's there at the draw, she's there during workouts, she's there during the schooling, like everything. Because like these events, like if you're not there all week or even on race day, there's just a lot going on. So you might not like remember everything. And so all of those photos get a personalized link, and each entrant gets their link. So they have these photos as memories. And then the top 3 finishers do get a personalized book. And so they can go through and sort of relive those memories a lot. So yeah, just try to, like I said, keep up with the small details to make sure everyone is able to celebrate.
Good. Okay, Kathy at Churchill. So my horse wins its first race, maiden race or allowance or a stakes race, any kind of celebratory things happening at Churchill?
For the stakes races, we always have the director's room open, and it comes up, one of the hosts, either Vicky or sometimes it's Tracy, will come and get you, and they take you up, and the trainer does their interviews and everything like that. For other races, it just depends really on the dates and how many, like Jody was saying with, Gulfstream, we're open a lot. And then we also have Turfway Park and Ellis Park, and our teams there are tiny but mighty, but they're doing a great job as well and doing different things and trying new things to make sure that everybody feels special and everybody feels celebrated. So it just really depends on the day and who's there. And unfortunately, we can't all be in all places at once.
Well, years ago, we won a race at Turfway, and we went right from the winner's circle to the champagne room, and it was just a allowance race, nothing special. So we thought that was pretty cool. So David, how about at Del Mar? I remember at one time it was said that Del Mar gave a bottle of bourbon in the winner's circle for every winner. Do you still do that, or was that something that went on for just a period of time?
We do. The sponsorship seems to change quite a bit, but a winner at Del Mar, they get flowers and a bottle of bourbon. As Jody mentioned, whether it's a 10-claimer, maiden claimer, the enthusiasm in the winner's circle, you never know. It's always exciting when you have a large group high-fiving and really getting into it. Some races you will have very few individuals in the winner's circle. It just varies, the day of the week, time of the year, that type of thing. We also have an individual that escorts the winning connections to a champagne lounge, and they can, similar to Santa Anita, view their replay multiple times. As well, I try to individually send a link to the winning trainer and sometimes owner if I have their cell phone number. Just from my perspective as racing secretary, I'm usually asking trainers to enter horses or asking them to fill out a stall app, that type of thing. It's nice to just communicate with them and say, congratulations, here's your link for winning race 4 at Del Mar. So I think it's so hard to win a race as an owner. I mean, if you win 2 out of 10, you're doing phenomenally well in this game, right? So trying to celebrate that winning experience with the owners as much as possible, I think, is critical.
Yeah, that's great. So Andrew, I'm sure it's on every owner's bucket list to win a race at Saratoga. That's probably enough celebration enough, but any special treatment or special recognition when you win a race at an NYRA track?
There are several different programs that somewhat depend on the level of race, but we do private celebrations for very varying different groups of winners. Depending on what the level is, the party may change a little bit depending on what stature of race that it is. And I think that to tease the new Belmont a little bit, we've put some unique ideas into areas in and around the winner's circle that are going to give us an opportunity to kind of celebrate a little bit differently than maybe others have seen in the industry before, but have a direct ability to interact with the winners right outside the winner's circle.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to that. Is that next year?
2026.
Belmont?
Yep.
All right. So I'd just like to remind the audience, if you have a question for any of our panelists, please use the Q&A button. And as we wrap things up in about a half hour or so, we'll get to those questions. So speakers, there's a new trend in ownership. There's racing clubs. There's a lot of racing syndicates, micro share groups such as My Racehorse. I think we've all heard of them. Some of these clubs have hundreds and literally even thousands of owners. So how are your racetracks accommodating these large groups? And do you see more of this type of ownership developing in the future? So Kathy, what are your thoughts on these large groups and how Churchill and your tracks can accommodate them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely going to be a trend towards it, especially if we look to international examples for syndicate patterns. For us, a lot of it's just communication. I've had a couple of different bigger groups call and say, hey, I'll have these people, I won't be there. Can somebody be there to make sure they get in the paddock, or, different things, because every state has a little bit different rule for being able to be a licensed owner. So that's a big part of it. A great example is we have a great relationship with the My Racehorse people. And last year they called and said, before Seize the Gray heads off to the Preakness, could we have people come and see him? So we worked hand in hand and just made sure that there was a really easy access path and all of Mr. Lucas was comfortable with it and everything like that. Unfortunately, we did not get permission from the weather and we ended up having a bit of a tornado threat, but we got everybody out safely. And because we had such a great line of communication, we were very able to make sure that everybody got out and got back safely. So that's an example of just communication. I think that's the biggest piece of it. And for the future of it as well, is to make sure that everybody knows how to just ask and, maybe not just showing up and demanding something, but being able to say, hey, we're going to have X number of people here or this. We've done the same thing at our track fairgrounds in New Orleans with just the Churchill Downs Racing Club, and I've been able to go down and say, hey, we're going to have some people there. Can somebody meet them in the paddock and make sure, and X, Y, or Z? Because again, each state's a little bit different with licensing for owners. And so to make sure that they're not stopped when they should actually be able to access the paddock is a big deal.
Okay. So Jody, at Santa Anita Gulfstream Park, I'm sure you've got some of these syndicates and large ownership groups. How does that work at your racetracks?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we love syndicates. It lowers the barrier to entry. So the more horses and more people we have, the better, for sure. So we're always just trying to create elevated experiences, have dedicated spaces for them, discounts, trying to get as many people into the winner's circle safely as possible. As sometimes there's a lot. Yeah, and I think, as Kathy was saying, on the bigger race days, it is all about communication. So it is working with their point person, making sure however they need their spaces allocated, that gets done. But then also, making sure that those people that maybe aren't getting some of those higher end seats, maybe we give them some GA passes or sort of create a space where they can all come, because again, that experience is really important. And yeah, I think, as Kathy also said, syndicates will continue to grow. I don't see why they wouldn't. It's, we've seen over the past few years them growing. And whether it's micro shares or just ownership groups coming together, it's mitigating the risks and also still getting the experiential benefit. So I just see a massive positive for this.
Okay, so David, there in California, you got number of syndicates that race there, and I know my racehorse races there. Do you see this trend continuing of these large groups of ownership, these large ownership groups?
Absolutely. I think the trend will continue and increase. One thing that the syndicates, to their credit, I think they've improved their communication with us in terms of what they're looking for. Once we know ahead of time, it makes it a lot easier to try to accommodate as many people as possible. I mean, Jody made a good point. Even if it's GA or whether it's at least it's something to start, and then you can kind of the day of the race, you could try to get everybody close to each other as much as possible. We have a group, Little Red Feather. They occupy an area called the Veranda, which is overlooking the paddock at Del Mar. That's where they like to be. And, you know, they will, for example, just communicate ahead of time before the race season, before a specific day, just exactly what they're looking for. And that just helps immensely.
Okay, yeah, right. So Andrew, these large groups, these My Racehorses, Little Red Feather, West Point Thoroughbreds, do these groups have any impact on your handle when they come to the races, or they have a horse that's in?
I think that it definitely, I mean, they're all fans at some extent. So there's definitely additional wagering and other things that takes place. I think that the benefit is the word of mouth that we talked about at the very beginning, and the fact that you have 30, 40, 60, 100, 250, 1,000 people out sharing that experience. So as everybody else has pointed to, the change that we've seen in terms of both parties maybe being more proactive and trying to figure out what their experience needs to be, how many people they think might show up, has given at least us at NYRA a much better chance to try to accommodate those groups appropriately and in a way that works, so that they can communicate to their groups what they can expect when they show up. And that's made it a much more seamless process for everybody.
Okay. Anybody else like to add to the whole handle question? What you see at your racetracks, is it having any kind of an impact?
I think, Gary, a lot of people may have seen or noticed if there's a My Racehorse entered, whether they're meant to be the favorite or not, they oftentimes are, because of all of those people betting on them. So I would definitely say there's a sway in the handle for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a good thing. Our handle's better. So, all right. So in a few months, we're going to have a session that talks about how the industry is promoting ownership to attract new owners, because we need a growing owner base. So can you talk about what efforts are taking place at your racetracks to attract new owners into the game? Who'd like to start with that?
I mean, I think we probably talked for the most part what I would say to this question already. I mean, I think ensuring the elevated experience, whether a regular race day or marquee race day, just goes to, you know, if owners are being treated properly, like, they are our biggest ambassador. So I think that's really important. Again, partnering with My Racehorse or Commonwealth or anything like that, bringing in more eyeballs, I think that's really important. Yeah, taking care of the current owners is really just the way to attract new owners. So I think that is one of the biggest things we all need to be striving for. All of them are ambassadors that are going to recruit. So any way that we can lower the barrier to entry, I think, is really important. And then like all of us on this call do, our big race days, these are really important times to be marketing them, making sure that people see them, and just so everyone does know, like, there is something for everyone, whether it's racing, gambling, lifestyle, something like that. There is something for everyone, and I just think it's really important to get that word out.
Okay.
I agree with Jody. I think that's the biggest part, is creating those more opportunities for eyeballs on it. And I think that's through marquee races or big race dates, all those things. Anytime you can get more people to see the owners, see the celebration in the winner's circle, it's really hard to not want to be a part of it when you see it. One thing that I think that all of our tracks, and I've just noticed, and I know we're doing it for sure, and I've noticed it on everybody's, is there's a bigger focus social media wise on celebrations and making sure that the owners, you know, things come up. I've seen a lot of uptick of coverage of the foals, you know, like foals to finish basically. And I think those are the ways that you end up creating new ways to get owners involved or create the interest in potential ownership. For me, it always goes back to the horse. So anytime you can get more eyes on the horse, that's easier to get people to want to be a part of it.
Okay. Andrew, David, anything else?
take my NYRA hat off and put on my just industry observer hat for a second. I think that it's an area that falls into the void, quite frankly, because I think that it's not determined whether that's a racetrack responsibility, a trainer responsibility, an industry responsibility. And I think that there's a lot of individuals out doing things to promote, whether it be certain microshare groups or certain forms of ownership. I think that there's a significant missing marketing component for the industry in terms of attracting new owners and then using some of those leads to identify whether that person might be interested in owning a horse by themselves, owning it in a partnership with another like-minded individual, joining a microshare group, and trying to cultivate that relationship. So when I was still in Minnesota working for Canterbury, we actually had embarked on an effort that unfortunately didn't go on as long as I would have liked, but it was really focused on trying to curate that marketing message and assist those people once they get into the industry in terms of kind of what the best opportunity might be for them to participate. I think that that's something that should be revisited at the industry level.
Well, as I mentioned, we plan to have a panel in a couple months on how to promote ownership and bring several stakeholders into that conversation so that maybe we can come up with some ideas from that. So, David, anything you want to chime in on?
Well, in California, we have an organization that's dedicated to owners, the Thoroughbred Owners of California, and they put together seminars. There's a new owner seminar where they have speakers, which usually takes place at the beginning of the Del Mar meet. But I agree with Andrew. I mean, this is a subject that I think there's room for improvement. Just from a grassroots perspective, I try to just encourage them to come out to the races. It's a lot easier at times to just not fight the traffic of Southern California and watch the race, at the comfort of your home. So I think definitely we can improve on trying to attract new owners because, like everyone said, once you get that experience and you're in the winner's circle, if the horse happens to win, I mean, that's a feeling that you want to share with your friends and others, and it's like nothing else in sports. So hopefully we can continue to improve in that area.
Yeah, I would agree on all accounts. Okay. So owners are responsible for selecting a trainer to manage their stable, and it's probably the most important decision an owner needs to make. So in your opinion, how important is it for owners, new owners, existing owners, all owners, to select trainers that are ethical, they play by the rules, versus just selecting a trainer based on how often they win races? So let's talk a little bit about that whole trainer selection process.
So I'll start. So I'll answer that, given my role as race secretary. Obviously, dealing with a lot of trainers and owners. I think it's one size doesn't fit all for a particular client. I think there's different ways that they could look at in terms of selecting a trainer, whether they want a larger stable, a smaller stable, a stable that gears towards grass racing more than dirt racing. Whether a younger trainer, a more experienced trainer, there's so many different factors. What I like to do, when owners communicate to me about selecting a trainer, I try to give them as much data and information as possible, encourage them to speak to other owners about certain experiences they've had with individual trainers. But in my experience, it's pretty much a case-by-case basis. There's some owners that want a trainer that maybe takes more time with a particular horse. There's some owners that just want bottom line results. And then there's day rate fees in terms of how many, economics of the cost of owning a horse. So I think it's just a lot of different factors, but I think the best thing I can do is equip them with data where they're able to make their decision with as much detail as possible.
Okay, great point. So Andrew, any thoughts on helping owners select a trainer, or at least giving them some direction?
Yeah, I think similar to what David said, I'm not necessarily asking myself or my team to go out and recommend specific individuals, but I do want potential owners to make an informed decision about who they want to employ and why they want to employ that person. And I think that understanding what their objective is in terms of what types of races that they want to run in, where they want to run, what types of horses that they want to own should influence the decision making on the trainer selection process. So, similar to what David said, again, our team is largely in the business of trying to provide those people with information to allow them to kind of work through that process on their own and come to the best conclusion relative to the specific needs or objectives that they might have, instead of trying to force, one size fits all solution to everybody.
Okay. Kathy or Jody, you want to add anything to that?
They've said it all. I think the only other thing that I try very hard, like Andrew, to not direct in any way, shape, or form, because it's really a personal preference at the end of the day. The only thing that I always ask to is, or give them the guidance, is to see where the trainer races. If you are, in California and your trainer only races in Kentucky, you're probably not going to get to go see that horse very often unless you're very comfortable with travel. And so I always try to make sure to point that out and just say, like, as you're thinking about these things, if going to every race is important, maybe look at see records at a certain track, at your home track, at whatever track it's easiest for you to travel to. And that would be the only real specific I'd give them, is the definitely think through your goal and how often you want to go to the races or see your horse.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I had an owner call me a couple of years ago who was pretty unhappy with his trainer selection. His best friend used that trainer, and his best friend really didn't need to be communicated with very often. He just wanted the highlights, and this gentleman wanted communication almost daily. And so it really became down to communication and his style of communication, not that the trainer wasn't a good trainer. It was just his preference on how often he wanted to be communicated with. And we do hear that often. So let me ask you this. What do owners tell all of you, if anything at all, what their principal issues are, either in ownership or within the industry? Things that you hear or things that owners communicate to all of you. So who would like to start off with that one?
Gary, I'm just going to add one thing to that last question.
Sure.
Obviously, I agree with everything that everyone has said. I do think one of the parts that you asked was basing it on an ethical. So obviously, as in everything in life, I think we're always judged by the company we keep. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind. Obviously, as an industry, we're very much judged and have a critical eye on how horses are treated. So that should be the moral obligation for everybody at all times.
Okay. So principal issues owners have.
I'm sure David can speak on this more. Obviously in California, shipping and probably day costs, but I will let David speak on that a little bit more.
Okay.
So obviously, in my role, a lot of communication with trainers and owners, and it's obviously challenging to be an owner. I mean, when you put yourself in their position at times, you're gearing up for a race. Here's the condition book. Your horse is working really well. Your trainer's excited. You're excited. You're ready to invite your friends to the races. The race doesn't go, or the race comes off the turf. Circumstances that are hard to control that come up. I think what my feeling is, what owners, one of their priorities is to rely on their particular horse having a spot to run in where they can compete and help pay the monthly bills that just continue to rise. So from my perspective, my main goal, and when I reach out to owners before Del Mar Summer Meet, is here's our program of races. We're going to do everything we can to fill our program in a structured format where you can plan on a series of races filling. We have a little bit of a luxury here at Del Mar where 99% of the time races stay on turf. I worked one meet at Saratoga one year, and I felt bad for a certain owner. Every time they entered a race, it was off the turf. They didn't get to run it the whole meet. So there are just so many things that can go wrong, basically, from an owner's perspective. So we try to provide some stability with our condition book, and where an owner can rely on races filling. Quite honestly, the biggest complaint I get is when there's an also eligible situation, which is good for me because it's a full field. But that's frustrating when an owner, by just luck of the draw, unfortunately doesn't get into a particular race. We try to write an extra race to accommodate that type of category. So I think, from my perspective, what I gather is owners just want spots to race in where they're competitive in a timely manner.
Okay.
I think for me, the main thing that I hear from owners, and it's something that you touched on, Gary, earlier, which is why I kind of laughed when you said it, is communication. We need to, think through the simplicity of things, how people can access things. And this is, across the board. This isn't just picking on the horse industry. I mean, I was trying to log into something to get my tickets the other day, and I'm in Ticketmaster all the time, and I had to call somebody and figure it out. So I think that those are the types of things that we have to go back to and think about, of just the ease of access. And then, there's a lot of stakeholders. And if somebody is picking up the phone and calling every single day, they might get a little bit more information, but is that really the way that whole thing should work out? And that's what I go back to: communication, and then thinking through the ways to effectively communicate what to expect, or how to get access to things, or whatever it is they're needing. And I think that we're getting better. I do think social media has had a huge piece of that, of just being able to update about your horses a little bit more, or what's going on at the track, or the big race date. So I think that it's getting better, but I think as an industry, that is something that, we all are striving for. And there's no perfect answer, because not everybody wants to be communicated to the same way, which is why you end up hearing about it 12 different ways.
Right.
Fair.
So I'd like to just remind the audience, if you have a question, please submit it using the Q&A. We got a few more questions we're going to kind of go over here, and then we're going to jump into the Q&A session. And I would like to go back to the selecting a trainer on ownerview.com. We have every trainer in North America listed with all their statistics, and stats is not the end all to everything. Many of the trainers have registered and put up their profile, a little bit about me, how to contact them, where they race. So feel free to use that information, because it's free and it's available to anyone on Ownerview. Just click on the trainer menu heading, and you'll be able to look at stats and profiles for any trainer that you're interested in. So, okay, good. Couple more questions before we get into the question and answer period from the audience. So, our sport, we've done a lot to improve safety, medication reform, aftercare. I mean, that's on everybody's radar. We have higher purses than I've ever seen, $100,000 maiden races and allowance races. So help me understand, why do you believe we're not experiencing a significant upswing in our industry, especially as it relates to fans and owners, with so many positive things going on? I mean, and we'll just go ahead and maybe Andrew, with the NYRA tracks, a lot of good things happening. You got a new Belmont Park that's going to be unveiled next year. Purses are just unbelievable. Medication reform. What are your thoughts on that?
Wide-ranging question.
Yeah,
Gary. Several topics. I think that first and foremost, it kind of goes back to one of the topics we've touched on a couple of times. You're allowing, or we've promoted entry points at a much lower point than they've been at any time before. And I think that for some that are maybe just seeking entertainment, there is no real motivation to move up in terms of overall commitment or monetary involvement. So I don't know how to necessarily measure that, but I think that the lower price points, although have been positive to get more people into the game, I think it's somewhat stagnated people that were looking to become larger owners or maybe get involved with a single partner. So I think that there's one component. I also think that we're still dealing with ramifications of decisions made a long time ago relative to TV coverage in the sport, how the sport's covered, the fact that we are still in a lot of jurisdictions running a significant number of race days during times of the day that aren't necessarily primetime viewing. So I think that there is still an exposure issue. So despite a lot of the positive things that have gone on in terms of the things that you listed, the audience isn't necessarily there to see those messages or hear those messages or be marketed to. And as such, because we're not doing what we need to do in some of those areas, although there's positives occurring, it's not generating the movement that, hypothetically you should based on some of the positive outcomes out there. I think at the same time, you've also, lost a lot of smaller jurisdictions. So penetration into those smaller or middle markets that used to be curating new fans, new owners, new trainers, and the next generation of the sport aren't there anymore. And the secondary and third-ary components of what that means to the sport long term are very concerning, because I think you're seeing some of that in how the sport is stagnating.
Yeah, I mean, the racetrack I grew up going to, Beulah Park in Columbus, Ohio area has been gone for some time. And so you wonder how do the people in central Ohio, even learn about horse racing? So Kathy, as far as Churchill Downs is concerned, I mean, we've got a lot of positive things going on in our industry. We've got a great race coming up in a few weeks that gets a lot of eyeballs, but that's just, one day.
Well, it's a whole week now. But
it is.
Just to be clear, we've got great racing from opening night through the rest of the season, obviously. But on the one hand, I think that Andrew was referring to this very well, but there's a lot more competition. There's a lot more competition for attention across the board right now. We're kind of, as an industry, late adopters to some of the social media and TikTok and some of those things that you just get eyeballs on it. You get eyeballs on it and people suddenly there's more interested. So I think that's one aspect, is there is just more competition for interest at this moment. On the flip side of it, I do think it goes back to some of the familiarity. We are not an agrarian society anymore. I live in the middle of Louisville, Kentucky, and I still have to drive a solid 25, 30 minutes to see my retired horses. And so I think that, just lack of awareness of how special the horse is and what it entails to be a jockey or a trainer, or how special those mornings on the backside are, things like that. I think that that's where we have some opportunity as an industry to really get people to connect. And to your point, how do the people in middle Ohio connect? It's hard, and you got to somehow touch them, and you got to figure that out. And I think that for me, the secret is the horse. If I can take somebody on the backside in the mornings or just watching morning works, most of the time you can get them to start feeling differently about horse racing. If you can't get them for that, I'm like, I don't even know how to do it. But I think that for me is how we go to and really reinforce the positive, is just get people more familiar. When it's more accessible, when it's not this crazy, weird niche sport, people are going to start watching it where it's easy. Every kid shoots hoops in their backyard or kicks the soccer ball or throws a football. Not every kid has ever touched a horse. So if we can go back to it and think through how to make it exciting for even the people that may never touch a horse in their life, how do we do that?
Jody, what would you like to add to this?
Yeah, I think definitely competition is one of the biggest factors. Excuse me. And I think Andrew did also start speaking on this earlier, but there is a need for uniform marketing content push across all of the racetracks. I am hoping that, I think most of us probably saw that there's going to be a Netflix series coming out in a few weeks. And hopefully this is going to be an interest spiked. We saw what it did for F1. I think just as an industry as a whole, we have to be ready for that. And it might be actually worth having the conversation, because we're going to have a lot more eyeballs that have literally never seen horse racing before, and just lowering that barrier to entry again. I think that is a conversation. We can't just throw out this Netflix series, or not we, but the Netflix people can't just throw it out. And then as an industry, we can't just expect it to change things. I think we're going to actually have to make internal decisions and across the board decisions that are welcoming these people to come. Even after COVID, when, horse racing was one of the only events that was able to be wagered on, I definitely saw once the doors were open, we were allowed to race again, more people were coming. So I do think the content and the eyeballs, there's definitely something to be said about that. It's just, how are we going to welcome them and keep them coming back?
Okay. We have so many great stories in our industry, but we sure do a good job of keeping them a secret. And every industry has their bad actors. I don't care if you're in banking, retail, wholesale. Every industry has, some bad actors, but all too often the general press, and I'm not talking about our industry press, New York Times, 60 Minutes, you name it, they focus on the negative episodes that take place in our industry. Why don't you take a moment and if you have an occasion that you can think of at your racetrack that had a very positive outcome, something that you generally don't read in the news or hear about on TV, that maybe you could share here online, and maybe we can get some of these stories to go viral. That because I know we have a lot of great stories. So David, would you like to start? Do you have any stories or any thoughts you'd like to apply to that?
I think a lot of times I'm trying to talk people into running in certain races, and sometimes they may not be the favorite, and they may be a long shot, but there was a particular owner trainer a couple of years ago that entered in a stakes race. It was a short field, and I saw the tote board, and I'm looking, and 40 to 1 to 50 to 1, and I'm like, oh, I just hope this horse runs third or fourth, or at least doesn't run last. And the horse happened to win. So it was gratification that at least, I tried to, put someone in the right spot, and it worked out. And the tears that were in the winner's circle and the jubilation from not only winning a stakes race at Del Mar, but winning at 50 to 1 and upsetting, one of the premier trainers, top horses. It was a special moment, and just to see the emotion of trainer to jockey to co-owner, to me, those are stories that I wish we could portray a little bit more. Obviously it doesn't happen too often that a 50 to 1 shot's going to win a stakes race at Del Mar, but for that day it was in a game that sometimes it can be difficult and there's so many ups and downs, that for that moment it felt like this was a positive result.
Great story. Andrew, what do you have?
So one of the things that kind of goes back to the last topic that Kathy was talking about is that I've given tours to different groups now probably for close to 20 years. And when I first started giving backstretch tours 20 years ago, the kid maybe had never been around a horse, but the parents had, and the grandparents, if they were there, certainly had. And in the last year or so, I've given a couple of tours, you're now another generation removed from that. So the kids haven't seen a horse, the parents haven't seen a horse, and if the grandparents are there, maybe they had connection to a farm or to a relative that had been around a horse. So it's kind of me working with our community relations manager and looked at like, what does Belmont need? It was really trying to go back to some of those younger groups and figure out ways to engage them in discussions about what the racetrack means to the community, the different things that go on a day-to-day basis around the racetrack. And we've actually been able to put together a program now that has worked with 4 or 5 different schools to really introduce students to all the different things that happen around a racetrack, from basic horse care to all the union trades that have jobs to what it takes to put on a major event day like the Belmont Stakes. So giving an opportunity for groups that had really, grown up around Belmont Park or in the surrounding community, maybe never even attended, to understand what the facility is, how it engages with the local community, and the wide range of jobs that are available within it, is something that's been incredibly rewarding for myself as well as our team. And I think hopefully makes us re-engage with that community in a way that makes a new Belmont Park not only special for racing fans, but special for Elmont, New York, special for Long Island, special for the region.
Yeah, that's great. Great story. Why don't you share that with the New York Times, please? So Jody, talk about some positive occurrences that you've witnessed there at your racetracks.
Yeah, I think every day there's something emotional that gets me just, I don't know, every time I see people celebrating, it makes my heart happy. So that's a daily occurrence. But there is one owner here that I've got to know, and he's quite young and he's new to the game. And so I did ask about his story, because everyone that comes obviously has a story and I love to hear them. And so his name's Dylan Donnelly. Unfortunately, in 2016, I believe he said he had a bad accident and he is wheelchair bound. But he told me that his grandfather back in the 70s used to come. This was his church. The DRF was his Bible. Like, this was his place to come. And they had fallen on some tough times. And his grandfather came and wanted to play a pick six. And the horse that caught his eye was named Lovely Idaho. And apparently this pick six paid very well with Lovely Idaho, and they were able to get out of some financial difficulties. Well, fast forward, obviously Dylan had the bug and didn't have money to become an owner, but was a very keen handicapper through all those times that he spent with his grandfather. I think he actually won the BCBC in 2020. I think he was 5th in the NHC last month, 2 months ago. And so when he had enough money, he actually reached out to a coworker here, Tyler Frostow, and asked to have contact with Mike Pipey. And so he did a couple claiming races, and then the first horse he bought was a filly. And of course, he named the filly Lovely Idaho. And as of just last Friday, Lovely Idaho has won her last 2 races and one going down the hill at the historic San Anita Downhill turf course. And just seeing his mom and him and his wife, like, just in tears, like, just the emotion that goes into it, like, I don't know, I'm getting like choked up just thinking about it. But it's just like those stories, you know, it's really important to speak about those. I mean, horse racing is life-changing to people, and I think more people need to know that.
That's a great story. So Kathy, why don't you wrap things up on our panel with a good story for us?
For sure. There's quite a few. I was actually, there's a very famous story right now it's been a very famous story of a little horse named Cody's Wish. And that's the first one, of course, that comes to mind. I was very privileged to be asked to be a part of the first time Cody actually got to see the horse race at Churchill Downs. And I can tell you, we put a ton of thought and energy into all the different parts. And we got Cody to the winner's circle to watch the race. And Tracy Wilkes and I looked at each other. We were like, we have not thought through what we're going to do if this horse doesn't win. Oh, no. And luckily, Cody's Wish just went ahead and won. So we didn't really have to think about that. But I think that is one extreme of what can happen when just a little bit of effort. And, like, of course, not every horse like that's going to be a Cody's Wish level horse. But I think that's one extreme. And then fast forward to a little bit later, that same, meet, we had a first responders day. And luckily we had some really great owners that didn't mind to like share their winner's circle with some of the first responders that came. And I just happened to be walking past the photography center and I saw a couple guys in their, uniforms. And I was like, oh, hey, did you, get to go? And they were like, you don't understand. We just got to present the trophy to the owners. And I was like, oh, well, how was that experience? And they just, knowing me from Adam, just told me all about it. And it, to Jody's point, it got me emotional because I was like, I forget that this is something that not everybody gets to do. They were so enthused about presenting a trophy that just said First Responders Day. And it meant so much to them to be able to share it with the owner. And I later talked to the owner and they were like, we don't often keep those types of trophies. We'll be keeping this one just because of how those few first responders reacted. So I think those are the two extremes of the, you've got this huge horse like a Cody's Wish. And then on the flip side, you've got a regular everyday. It was I don't even think it was an allowance race. And those owners were like, this is one of our favorite trophies versus. So I think those are the two that I would give as my example of some good stories in racing.
Oh, absolutely. Great stories. And the whole Cody's Wish, I mean, often I had to wipe my tears away.
Oh, yeah.
It's just wonderful story. So, well, let's go ahead and wrap up that with our discussion. And we're going to take a little break here and move into the Q&A period. So while we sort through the questions, we're going to hear from our sponsor for the Q&A, West Point Thoroughbreds, and then I'll be right back with the speakers with your questions. So let's go ahead and hear from West Point Thoroughbreds, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. We have a few questions. So I'm going to start off with the first question that came through from our audience. So why is there no reciprocal between the states on the backside access? For example, I'm a licensed owner in California. Why can't I access the backside in New York? Andrew, you want to take that one?
Yeah, largely it comes down to the process of licensure, which obviously, if you've been involved in ownership, you know is not necessarily the same state to state. Specific to New York, it's what I brought up before about the fact that we require the separate ID because it also serves as other benefits to horse owners, whether that be parking or admittance into specific areas. So unfortunately, we can't do that off of a California license, but we can do it once you get your New York license.
Okay, but I would assume if owners licensed in a state, they would have access to the backside of any racetrack within that state. I mean, is that correct to say?
Yeah, at least from my perspective, yes.
Okay, all right. So here's another question, and Andrew, you actually covered this, but I'm going to ask it anyhow since one of our audience sent it in. I've seen Keeneland promote the sport of racing by engaging schools and other organizations to come to their track in the mornings to watch workouts. They also educate the public about equipment used on the horses. They have tour guides and etc. What efforts are the panelist organizations making that we might not be aware of? Something similar. So at Churchill Downs, is there anything similar that you all do with schools and outside organizations?
We work a lot with a lot of different various organizations and schools and organizations that serve the schools at all of our tracks. I think the best example, though, is partnerships with the Kentucky Derby Museum, which is a separate standalone 501c3 that, we've gifted them the land, that they host everything. There's a partnership that we've had for years with them to really increase access for school children to be able to come to the museum, because sometimes it's not that conducive when we're racing to get there for kids. So I think that that's been a big effort. Personally, I've done some stuff with trainer Michelle Lovell and an organization here in Louisville. It's called I Would Rather Be Reading. And we brought very small groups of kids, very small, because obviously, again, safety is foremost. And they came and read to the horses. And it sounds so silly and small, but watching these little kids just light up to read to a horse was immense. That touched a lot more people than I thought it would. I thought it was just something silly that I was doing. And then people were reaching out to me like, oh, that's such a cool, how do I get my organization signed up? I was like, oh, I started something. Now I got to think this through. But those are just two examples. I know that we have also expanded that kind of reading mentality at our track at Ellis Park. So I think it also just depends on the areas around it. And, not every neighborhood around a track is the same. So that's a big one. But I would say our biggest focus is that partnership with the Kentucky Derby Museum and the ability for school children to access the museum.
Okay. Jody or David, anything you'd like to chime in on?
Yeah, we definitely do a lot of different career days with some of the local schools. Actually, when I worked for the Breeders' Cup, I had done a career day with the Kentucky Derby Museum. So sort of bringing that sort of program to our tracks as well, I think is really important to get people on track, seeing horses and just seeing how everything works here. And I think also a lot of the mentorship programs that a lot of the tracks and especially First here we're a part of, like I think the Ed Brown Society is part of all of the tracks on this call, just offering those sort of opportunities to people. And it is sort of like a grassroots way to bring people into the business and industry. So yeah, we work with the Ed Brown Society, Cal Poly Vet students, Compton Junior Equestrians, and a lot of different internship programs. And I do think, like I said, it could be something that as an industry overall, we could sort of create a more well-structured mentorship program that does allow people an easier access to see what racing is like, what it provides to them before they decide that they want to maybe put any sort of money into it. So I think that is a really important avenue.
Okay, David?
Yeah, I think everybody covered that question really well. One thing I would add, the horsemen and their flexibility in terms of barn tours and their availability to show a particular, if it is a middle school group, just to show them the horses, communicate with them. It's a special thing when you say, oh, this horse ran in, the Kentucky Derby, or, I think having the cooperation amongst the horsemen, I think has really improved over the last few years. And I think that's a good start to expose as many people as possible to the backside and see what, the job of a groom entails. And I think that's important in a safe way. Obviously, there's the liability to some of these things. But from our standpoint, I'm really, the horsemen and horsewomen in California have been tremendous as far as just allowing that access.
Okay. So last question, kind of an interesting question. I'm not sure what it's about, but are any of you speakers horse owners or have been past owners? Jody, you mentioned you used to do eventing.
Yeah, I've owned horses, but not in the race world. Well, I guess I have had some micro share ownership, so I am an owner. So go me.
Very good.
But yeah, I've owned horses in the past, and I've actually, most of the horses that I evented were off the track thoroughbreds. So that would be my connection. But even friends and family or anyone that has a connection, I just sort of take them on as my own and cheer them on like they're mine. So maybe that counts.
Okay. Kathy, I thought you mentioned we were talking about visiting your horses.
Yeah, I was gonna say I might have the weirdest experience. My dad was an owner before I was born, so I kind of grew up on the backside, actually, at Churchill Downs, and it's always been a part of my life. And I kind of have a weird path because I didn't really think that working in horse racing was for me, because I'm too big to be a jockey and not smart enough to be a trainer and throw up when I see blood. So I didn't realize there were jobs for me in this industry. So I think that, I always just thought I'd be an owner like my dad, and I still am. We're a part of a couple different syndicates, and then I've taken on a couple of syndicates on my own that I'm a part of. I don't really like to run them because it's really hard, and I like really well run one.
Okay. All right.
And then I have, like Jody said, some retired horses that own me, I should say. So they're an owner as well.
Okay. David, how about yourself?
I obviously grew up around horses my whole life with my dad, a trainer, my grandfather. I, however, was not useful at all around the barn. I may have been the worst groom. I struggled to put a bandage on. I love the animal to death, but I struggled to saddle a horse. I mean, it was really a disaster. Obviously horse ownership through my family, my grandfather owned horses. I would love to get more involved with retired horses. I think that's something that the industry's done a better job of over the past few years, and we have to continue to do better at. But yeah, had experience working around horses, but never owned my own horse yet.
Okay. Andrew, how about yourself? Minnesota or New York?
I'll challenge David for the title of the worst groom on the call. But my family's been around racehorses for close to 45 years. So my aunt and grandmother bred the first registered thoroughbreds in the state of Minnesota when racing started in the state of Minnesota. My aunt's still an active owner to this day, mostly in the Midwest. And my in-laws breed and race American quarter horses throughout the middle of the country and in the Southwest. So lots of involvement, but none directly.
Okay, well, interesting question and answers, because I think it shows, that this is a labor of love. It's an industry we love. Even myself, I've been in it for 40 years. We had a newborn foal last Thursday. So it is something that we love to do and be involved with. So I think that's going to wrap things up, everyone. So I'd just like to thank our panelists, gosh, for your time, your insight. Thank you, Jody, Kathy, Andrew, David. Glad you're on. Appreciate everybody being here, and just your insights and your expertise has just been invaluable. So we thank you very much.
Thank you.
You guys for having us.
Yeah, for sure. I'd also like to thank our panel sponsor, Muirfield Insurance, New York Thoroughbred Breeders, West Point Thoroughbreds for sponsoring the Q&A. But most of all, and we've said this, I'd like to thank the owners, because without your investment in racehorses, we simply just don't have a product or an industry. And I think everybody would agree with that. So we greatly appreciate it that you took the time to be online with us today. So next month, we're going to be back. We're going to talk about in May, on May the 6th, broodmare reproduction. We're going to have some videos from broodmares from some vets from Rood and Riddle doing the examination and getting mares in foal and carrying their foals and delivering their foals. So it should be a real interesting webinar next month. So until then, be safe. Enjoy the lead up and the actual Kentucky Derby coming up. And I'd like to thank everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here.